Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome back to the show three-time Academy Award-winning filmmaker Guillermo del Toro. He's here today to talk to us about his stunning new adaptation of Frankenstein. Like everything Guillermo does, Frankenstein is a visual feast, and I'm so happy that we were also able to welcome his longtime collaborator, cinematographer Dan Laustsen. This marks their fifth film together, going all the way back to Mimic in 1997. And along the way, Dan has earned 2 Oscar nominations for his work with Guillermo on The Shape of Water and Nightmare Alley. That's exactly where I wanted to start this conversation, by asking what brought these 2 artists together in the first place and how that spark has evolved into such a long and fruitful collaboration. Here's director Guillermo del Toro.
I think Dan may appreciate or not this, but I think I loved that he was not afraid of the dark. First of all, I wanted really, I like, to this day, I fight for really dense blacks. I don't like them crushed. I like them to have information, but I like them to be almost like a painting or an illustration, to have a really strong base of blacks. When you see a doré reproduced photomechanically or a doré reproduced by a printing plate, the difference is in the blacks. You know, the density of a great engraving in the blacks is, to me, the basis of the composition that is gonna have the density necessary to make a great composition. And that's the first thing I said to Dan, if I remember it correctly, which is, I like that you're not afraid of the blacks, of the dense darkness.
Tell me a little bit about the decision to shoot large format on the Alexa 65. What prompted that, and why was that the right choice for this particular film?
When we shot Nightmare Alley, we shot a little bit of 65, but we didn't shot with lenses that could cover the whole 65. And that was the reason, because those days we couldn't carrying the 65 on the Steadicam. So I shot 65 when we was on cranes or dollies on Nightmare Alley. And then when we went to Steadicam, we shot with the LF. And that was perfect, but Guillermo and me just talked so much about we should go into, like, we want to shoot this period movie, but in a very modern looking way. So we decided to go 65. I spoke to my Steadicam operator, James, if he was able to carrying the 65 on his Steadicam, and he said that should not be a problem. So we did that. So we shot the whole movie on the 65. We never shot anything like LF or anything. We shot a little bit when we shot the miniature shoots in London. That was with a Red Dragon, I think it was. But that was the main movie was shot on Alexa 65 and with like Italia lenses, because I think those lenses cover the 65 sensor so well. And I'm really big fan of large format, because the focus length is a little bit longer because the format is so big. And the way we are shooting, like we're starting a big wide shot and coming in and ending in the close-ups in the end of the shot. But because it's a 24 millimeter, it's not distorting as much as if you shot 35, you would shoot on an 18 or something. And when you're coming into a close-up, it's just not being nice.
I see. So the 24 mil lens allowed you to do those big moves without introducing a lot of distortion as you got closer into the close-ups. I see. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
And that is a beauty, because it's still a 24 millimeter. That's the large format. The wide angle is 24, and large format is a super wide angle, but you don't have the distortions of the lenses, and especially the like Italian lenses, they're so square. It's really, I think it's a beautiful combination. We liked it a lot, and we made some tests, and we liked that coming into a big close-ups. And we shot, I think we shot 90 or 95% of the movie with that 24 millimeter. We shot a lot of that. The bad part of that is the combination between 65 and Thalia lenses is very sharp. And we are not too sharp. So we are shooting with a diffusion filter behind the lens. A black Pro-Mist, a quarter or 8, depends a little bit what we are doing. We're changing that. Depends what shot it is. And it's just getting very, very nice skin tones, and they're burning the highlight out beautiful. But they keep the black. You see Frankenstein, the black, the richness of the black is very, very good, because the diffusion filter is behind. and you don't get a filter flare, you get a lens flare. There's a lot of good things about shooting with a diffusion behind the lens. The backside is you have to take the lens off, change filters, put motors back. But it's not a big deal. Doc Lavender, my first day, she's amazing to all that stuff.
One of the things that I love about Frankenstein is that, it looks and feels like a horror movie, but it's actually, I realized it's a love story and kind of a love triangle. So for you, Guillermo, I'm kind of curious, like, how did the visuals contribute to that juxtaposition of the tone?
So I didn't want it to look or feel expressionistic in the sense of the style of the film, but actually very painterly. And to me, it's a family drama. Obviously, to in terms of genre, it is definitely there's no family drama with somebody made of parts of corpses, but metaphorically there is. And metaphorically, this is one of the best parables of fathers and sons and the fall from paradise that you can get. And Shelley was very cognizant of the parable nature of the tale. That's why she very prominently uses Paradise Lost as a ringer for the text. So visually, I decided to divide the movie in the novel is basically, and this is a very, very common recourse in Gothic, which is a tale within a tale within a tale within a tale, almost like Chinese boxes. And in order to do that, sometimes like in Dracula and parts of Frankenstein, it becomes an epistolary novel. Is Captain Walton relaying what happened to his sister, through several letters. And in Dracula, you use documents, letters. It's a lot more experimental and modern in a way. Obviously, to me, that necessitates an equivalent visually. So the opening is done in a very limited palette, mostly white, some blue, and some gold. And it's basically self-contained in those colors. Then the childhood is contained in black, white, and red. That's it. That's basically the palette of the childhood. And the red of the mother is going to continue through the movie as the connection between Elizabeth, Victor's quest for the mother, and the creature. Those are the three characters that connect through red. Nobody else really has red in the movie. Nobody. And no other set other than the lab, other than Elizabeth in the necklace, other than the gloves of Victor, the batteries, the red angel, everything, the creature eating the red fruit from the tree when it falls from grace, the blood of the creature, blah, blah, blah. This is all thematically connected. But color-wise, like all the colors flood Victor's prime youth, when he's active and brilliant and charged. And then the creature comes in and the camera, which was very active with Victor, becomes very sedate, like a fairy tale. And the color palette also changes. There are no more, the colors become straw, wood, moss, earth, even the cassock that he wears is a very deep cyan blue. So, the direction of all these things allow the parable to exist. The fact that the movie starts with a sunrise with the captain's back to it and ends with a sunrise with the big creature facing it. All these things are discussed with all the departments, but none of them wants to achieve horror. Even the creation of the creature is done like a waltz. It's done like a joyful thing, not like a horror moment. It's done gleefully.
I've heard that for both of you, Barry Lyndon was kind of a reference and an important film but you wanted, as you said, you wanted to bring a more modern sensibility to the film in terms of color and camera movement. Tell us about that DNA of Barry Lyndon, and then kind of how it influenced what you did.
We knew we were shooting the period movie. It's more or less the same period like Barry Lyndon. You know, it's like there's no electrical light, so everything is like 1800 and something. So everything is candles, torches, or natural lighting. So we look at Barry Lyndon, and you know, as a cinematographer, I think it's a masterpiece, and Guillermo loves it as well. So we saw that, of course. I don't think we sat down and looked at it together, but you know, we knew so well. But we did a couple of tests with those candles. But we like more the single source lighting. You know, we'd like to blackness, the dark side of the faces should be black. And you know, when you're letting everything with candles, as I did in Barry Lyndon, it's getting very, very soft and very beautiful. But we want to have a more dramatic lighting setup. So we went away from everything candles, and we like our cross lighting, you know, and the color white as well. You know, we have single source light, but we want to have, for example, when we're at the lab, there's a candle scene there. Everything is lit with candles, really beautiful, warm candlelight color. But then we are lighting the back walls or the walls with steel blue, for example. So we have this like contrast all the time about very warm key light, and then the walls are, for example, getting lit with steel blue. So we have the contrast all the time, and I think that's giving a richness to the look, because it's not only one color.
I love that intentionality around the use of the color and your entire kind of theory of the palette. And I know that this is a movie that you wanted to make for a very, very long time. Has this always the use of the color? Was this always clear to you from the beginning when you wanted to make this movie?
Well, not as a kid. I mean, I wanted to make this movie. I started to want to make this movie at age 11. So no, I was not that clear. But it becomes clear right when I do Chronos. I remember when I read an interview with Fellini and one with Hitchcock. They both said something interesting. Fellini said, "Look, I started in black and white with my neo-realist films, and the moment I took color," he said, "I took color very seriously." And he said, "And the color I took most seriously was red." And then Hitchcock said, "Look, I've done every aspect of film. I started in silent cinema, and when I got sound, I took sound very seriously, and when I got color, I took color very seriously." You know, and I tried to do it from Chronos onwards, very seriously. I have never approached a movie in which color is used casually, and certainly not red.
You have such incredibly specific ideas around color and movement and composition. What's your process for communicating that, not only to Dan, but to your other department heads? Do you rigorously storyboard? Are there production design? Like how do you communicate what that vision is?
The first step is always verbal and annotating, like, you know, this is my notebook, you know? Mm-hmm. So, you know, I draw.
Wow. Is that watercolor?
No, it's acrylic.
Wow. Acrylic in your little moleskin notebook. Amazing.
It's not. It's an Italian notebook.
Okay.
But I draw. We storyboard, but storyboards should only be useful into breaking down the elements. I never say it has to be this shot. It has to be these elements, right? Artificial head, real knife, artificial knife, real head, medium shot, blah blah blah. You know, but I think you need to. Storyboards are taxidermy, you know, and I want it to be alive. I want the animal to be alive. So you court shaking the tree when you're shooting. Then the next level of dictation is verbal. You know, I don't ask for an opinion on certain areas. I just tell them that, and then from that on is a collaboration. Look, if I can put the fundamental touchstones of the film in place, then everybody can play. Then we can be flexible.
You talk about the way that you guys like to shoot with single source lighting, and you've got a lot of strong, you know, lighting coming in through windows. from a narrative standpoint. So I'm kind of curious, is that equally an aesthetic choice? And is it also practical? Because you do a lot of pre-lighting, but then you've got a lot of freedom once you get on the set. You're not locked in because you have a huge lighting setup that you're carrying around within the set.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're basically gaffering with the set. That's your cucularis, you know. The set is your cucularis, is your banner, you know. And so the two things that have to happen is when you are planning the movie, you cannot all of a sudden change the direction axis of the set. Your hero angle is your hero angle. That's it. You cannot say, oh well, what if we go this way? Number one. Number two, you have to really be cognizant of the effect in your head before you commit to it. So you are, and that's why I say there is no individual departments in my movies. I mean, I think set design is gaffering, you know, and wardrobe is cinematography. Cinematography is production design. You're giving the shapes and the shades and the compositional elements through the light. So, you know, we try to be as interdisciplinary as possible from the first movie to this one. But it is a big commitment that gives you a lot of freedom, as long as you don't change your mind, which I don't.
Really?
Not in those ways.
Okay.
I'm stubborn, but not irrational. Well, it is. I mean, you have to know, as a director, you have to know when you have the luxury of changing your mind and use it, and when you don't, and submit to it. The 50% of our work is logistics. People talk about vision. You know, 50% is logistics. Another 30% is hardware execution. You're laying the tracks. You're choosing between a dolly and a techno and a steady and an Elemac or a mini crane, a mini jib. Each of these tools is going to render you a completely different shot. And you know, vision is sort of the 20% that launches things and is the most flexible of all things for me, frankly, because it has to be alive. And the rest is logistics and hardware.
When we are designing the set, you know, it's a very strong collaboration between Guillermo, Tamara, Kate. All head of departments making the same movie. And that's, of course, that's coming from Guillermo. But the windows are going to be our gobos. You know, the reason we have the light outside the windows is just to give it more naturalistic flow into the rooms. And, you know, we're breaking up the light and shadows. And because we're using so much smoke, so if you have lights inside the room, it's just getting milky. And the beauty of, like, because we are shooting really wide shot, all the set, you know, is really wide and beautiful shots. And we are ending, most of the time, we are ending in a close-up. So if you have light inside the sets, you're going to see it. And it's a much more beautiful lighting setup. So it's the two combinations, like a practical and aesthetic. You know, we really like to have the light outside all the time. We never have light inside the room in Frankenstein. And it works so beautiful, I think.
Now, Dan, you're telling me that you never cheat? Like when you come in for a close-up, you never like bring in a little fill light just to kind of everything's coming from the outside?
99%. You know, of course, sometimes we're getting a little bit in with some, but very, very little. Because a lot of times the close-up of the actors is the end of the crane shot. So, you know, when there's no way to come in there. So most of the time it's like, let's in as one shot. And, you know, we try to kill some of the fill light when we're coming in, but, you know, I'm not a big fill light guy. I'm just let the room make the fill light. So it's not, I'm not a big fill light guy. I want single source lighting, and the black has to be as black as we dare.
Each of those shots that you said has a completely different feel, and there's no handheld in this film, I don't think.
No, I have used handheld very rarely. I've used it on Blade 2 and I've used it on Kronos. That's it.
What is your allergy to handheld? What does that mean to you?
I think it needs to never pop out. I mean, when people talk about tone is camera work, you know, and I have a very, very stringent idea of what the camera needs to do. I mean, and that's my narrative pulse. You know, I control the allegro, the largo, the camera is either rhythmic or symphonic, and you cannot combine a handheld blatantly with any other tool that easily. Not me. So I use it only when the energy requires it. You know, I may have used it maybe during one scene in Devil's Backbone, but not many times. Oh, and we use it on Mimic. We use it on Mimic. And it's a good tool. Some people are fantastic at it. And I actually plan to use it a lot on the next movie because I'm trying to scare myself into trying new tools.
Our friends at Netflix gave us some fantastic scenes to discuss, and the first one I want to talk with you about is a scene from very close to the first film. It's the first time we see the creature. We're at the ship encased in ice.
Mi comando!
We want to do everything as real as we can. You know, the ship is built for real. You know, we want to have real light. And there was a lot of discussion about the torches because people talk about, oh, the torches is not safe, you know, because it's moving in the wind. So they want to do digital torches safety-wise. And, you know, we said, that's not possible. You have to do real light. You know, you have to be flaming torches. And the beauty of that is when the wind is changing, the light is changing. And we like this organic. That's the reason we are so big fans of smoke and steam and rain, because it's just giving the third element to the scene. And the torches is a big, you know, those guys was doing the key light for me, but that was the gaffers. The actors, Danish actors, were holding these torches, pretty powerful torches, but they handled it so well. But that was the key light. And then, of course, we have Raptors with steel blue on big cranes. But that was, again, as I talked about before, with Barry Lyndon, you know, it's just the lab, for example, it's a contrast between the warm light and the steel blue. And that is so, it's giving so rich look. So we tried that, of course, and color is not color because color is very sensitive for exposure. So, you know, if you don't are right on with your exposure for the steel blue, it's just getting too blue, for example. So there's a lot of variations there because a color is not a color. So color is a combination with the exposure. So you have to be as exactly as you can do. But that is like key light. The torches was our key light. And, you know, it works on the ship. It works amazing. I love it. Every time I see it, like, oh, this is really cool.
The thing that I love about that scene visually is just the contrast of the warmth of the torches with the coldness of the sky. And if you could just talk about your use of color in that particular sequence, I think it's just stunning.
Yeah, that is funny enough, something that I discovered in one shot in Kronos. We had the blue, and he was reading the diary of the alchemist by a lamp. And I thought, this is so beautiful. And then I was talking to Jim Cameron. He was talking about red and blue, super saturated red, and he called it something like fire and ice. And then when Dan and I were doing Mimic, we I said, we're going to make the flares gold, and we're going to make the night cyan. And we started using the filter steel blue for nights, which I believe, I may be mistaken, but Dan and I believe we were the first ones to use that color for nights. And then now it's very popular. But we were trying to have a bluish tint that had a lot of yellow in it, so it could be green, cyan, you know? And we found steel blue was the perfect shade of that. Now we do almost green nights, you know? And it's very, very cyan, very pronounced. And I think that is one of those things that, if it was a shop, it would say using it since 1996. Servicing the industry since 1996 is a look that I find particularly compelling. It is very, very crisp. It is very dramatic, and when Dan and I always chat about how we're gonna light it, and I like real sources to be visible.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like mysterious nightlight.
that has no motivation.
That has, well, Dan and I used to call it bullshitanium blue. Let's put some bullshitanium blue on this, but because darkness is not blue, but it's a convention with color film. So and I even pushed Dan. I think very reluctantly, I pushed Dan to do some day by night, which he resisted horribly. But I knew we needed it because
where's the day by night in this film?
Well, certainly when the creature comes to after being shot in the throat, and he looks at the moon, that was day by night, and it took every single cell in Dan's body to relax because he wanted. And I said, look, Dan, because we were dealing with a terrain that, planning a movie like this is half a battlefield, half an artistic endeavor. And we knew that we could not get because it's the winter, you need to get the cranes there several weeks, if not months, before the ground thaws and becomes mud. So I said, Dan, we cannot, those cranes are going to be visible from the other angle. When you plan a thing like the ship, you're dealing with 20 cranes or more because you have the lighting crane, you have the gaffering crane, you have the stunt crane, and you have the structural cranes all surrounding the ship, and they can only be visible. You have to make them be able to lower them and raise them according to the angle. And in this case, we could not. And I said, we're going to do that day for night.
And I understand that set with the ship encased in ice was an exterior built on a big parking lot. That was in Toronto?
That was in Toronto, outside the studio.
When I first saw that, I thought, well, surely this is just a massive soundstage, but you're building that huge set and doing it outside and controlling all that light with the wind. It must have been nothing but a series of challenges for you.
It was a lot of challenges, of course. There was no studio that was big enough to do that. We talked about going into the studio, but there was no studio that was big enough. And because the light, again, have to be as far away so all the backlight on the ship is 300 feet cranes, far, far away. So that is the distance again. That's the same as I talked about light outside the windows. If you have the options to bring light far away, it's just going to be much more beautiful. So we did that. We have amazing lighting crew there in Toronto.
Did you have every light in Toronto on this set?
No, I don't think so. I remember all the key light was from torches. So, with the special effects just brought us a lot of torches. So that was actually the key light. So the moonlight was from big cranes, but it was not like we have a lot of lights on. We have a lot of big cranes to carrying the light. And, you have that system called Raptors as a kind of a Dinos where you just can click on dichroid filters to change that. And that was something they made for us when we did the Shape of Water. So it's the same dichroid filters we used, and that it works extremely well.
The second scene that we have to talk about that I wanted for you to kind of walk us through is the first time that Victor arrives at the abandoned works, and he's judging to see if it's going to be a good spot for his laboratory.
The moment I laid eyes on it, the tower, I could feel destiny calling.
The structure's basically intact, and there's a chute going from top right to the bottom. I can arrange for your belongings. We'll bring them from Edinburgh.
Anything you need or want shall be granted.
Anything.
Anything.
So I read about this sequence. I'm just to make sure I have this right because it's so amazing to me. You put the lights in on this set before the set was actually finished shooting. Is that correct?
Some of that, because the set it's a gigantic set, and the studio, everybody wants to shoot to the fire lanes now, and everybody wants to shoot built to the ceiling. So we put a lot of lights. There's a big round hole in the top of that set, and we put a lot of lights up there before they start building it, because when the roof was coming up, you could not get up to the light. So we put a lot of vortexes and area lights up, all kinds of stuff in the ceiling, just to be sure we have it. But again, I'm not a big fan of putting lights inside. We used that a little bit, and then we made a catwalk later on up there so we could light the walls, as I talked about before, with 20Ks and steel blue. But all the light in that scene is coming from Raptors and 20Ks outside the windows with full 85 on to make this like sunset feeling. But we put a lot of lights up before, but we just so we have the options if we was running into issues, because you could not put it up later on. So that light was hanging there for months and months and months before we using it.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite scenes in the film is the big, the confrontation and the lightning storm, the first time that the animation of the creature happens. There's just so much going on in that scene in terms of contrast of lighting, and the lightning strikes and the colors are so bold. You go down into that chamber and the reds are popping.
Way we talked about that scene is because it's starting in sunset, and he's preparing the making of the creature, and then the light is changing to at the magic hour. He's running up to his friend and said the storm is passing by. They're running up to the roof, and then the lightning strikes is starting. The lightning is starting, and when they're coming back again, we're changing the smoke pipes to steam pipes, because steam is much more organic. Smoke is just hanging in the room, making it like a soft smoke, but steam is very aggressive and very, very cool. So we changed that. We changed the color of the batteries, and then the lighting strikes is getting into the key light. When he's coming down and he looks up, we're flashing the lighting strikes, and that's going to illuminate his face, and it's coming down to black again. So the lightning strike is getting a very, very organic part of the lightning, comparing with the steam. So that's like, it's getting very, very organic there. And it's like the steam is a big, big deal there. And of course, when I read that scene, I was a little bit like, how should I do this? That was the scene I was most concerned about doing. But again, prepping and talk to Guillermo about what do we dream about, how should we do it. And we spent a lot of time to make those batteries, because we want to have the batteries again they should be organic. So we filled them with smoke. So there was something going on. So it was not a piece of plexiglass, whatever it was. So again, we try to have this third element all the time.
Now, I just want to follow up on you actually used steam instead of smoke in that sequence?
Steam have that beauty about it's very diffused and then it's disappearing. If you use that with smoke, it's just going to keep going with diffused. And steam is that we have done that on Nightmare Alley. We used a lot of steam, because it's so organic compared to smoke. And I think that's one of the reasons that scene works so crazy powerful, because steam is just it's so organic. And that together with the lightning strike is getting, oh my God, here's something happening.
I'm fascinated by the way you talk about color, how tight it is to exposure. And so yeah. I'm kind of curious about your involvement in the grading process and the DI process. It sounds like you try not to do a lot of color changing in the DI process.
When you're doing a movie that's so color precise as Frankenstein, because the set design, the colors that are set, the color of Kate's costumes, everything is blending so fantastic together, because Guillermo making these concept drawings in the beginning. So everybody's starting more or less on the same level. He wants to have that set, this kind of color and the costumes. So I'm not running it a lot. I'm doing it a little bit like when you shot on film. I'm putting the same film stock in, and then I'm doing a little bit color saturation and a little bit more black at my DRT. And if I want to change the color, I'm changing with lights. If I want to put, as I said before, steel blue on the lights or more orange on the sunset. So the color palette from our dailies and the color palette in the DI is very, very close to each other. Of course, I'm changing in DIs because I need some help that makes it more black, put up power windows into and stuff like that. But the color palette from the dailies to the final movie is very, very close to each other.
This movie looks so stunning in Dolby Vision. You talked about the richness of the blacks, that contrast, and also red, which looks very different in Dolby Vision than it does in SDR. So can you talk a little bit about Dolby Vision, and also, the track of this movie in Dolby Atmos is really wonderful too. And I'm kind of curious, for you having access to these technologies like Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos, what does that do for the audience? How does it augment the experience of your film?
Well, look, the two main things in visual, Dan and I were joined by deep blacks in the image, and this is as close as you get to pure black. And this is also in the highlights, is gonna give you the most pristine purity. There's not gonna be the graded yellow somewhere in the white. There's not gonna be a degraded blue or cyan in the white. There's not gonna be, I'm allergic to magenta, especially in the contamination of the highlights. And Dan can tell you about it. And every color correction technician I've worked with, if I see magenta, I lose it. So it's gonna guarantee the non-contamination of the highlights, the purity of the highlights, the purity of the contrast peaks and valleys, like no other technology. If you're seeing a big screen with Dolby, you're seeing exactly what we had in the color correction suite, and it renders the experience very painterly, very vivid, very, very accurate. And the same is true for sound. When you mix the right way, the way we mix is what I call the fishbowl approach. You are swimming in a four-walled aquarium, and you can hear the back, you can hear the sounds surrounding you, but you should not be. If you don't have a translation tool that goes very accurately from the mixing suite to the theater, some of those mix effects can become a little too present. And the beautiful thing is to guarantee that they're going to translate exactly right in the theater you're playing the movie in.
The dynamic range is getting fantastic. It's really, really beautiful. You have details in the highlights and you have details in the black, but we are not too crazy about too many details in the black. We want to have the black to be black. And of course, Dolby Vision is doing that really cool. It's just a big dynamic range, and the color is punchy, and that's exactly what we like. But But again, we try to put that look into our dailies, of course. Dolby Vision it's just a fantastic tool because it's getting much more dynamic. And you can keep the highlights, it's not burning out. You can get details in the highlight. Even with these lighting strikes where it's like really, really bright, you still have some details in the light, in the highlights. And it's, I love it. I think it's a really good tool.
Guillermo, Dan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and talking to us about Frankenstein. It's a stunning looking film and quite an achievement for you both.
Thank you. And I'll see you again next time.
Thank you very much.
Many thanks to Guillermo and Dan for joining us on the show today, and an extra special thanks to our friends at Netflix for helping us put this conversation together and for providing those fantastic clips to discuss. Be sure to check out Frankenstein, now streaming on Netflix in Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. And if you can catch it in theaters this award season, I highly recommend that experience as well, and I'm sure Dan and Guillermo would agree. You can find links, as always, in our show notes. And if you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, be sure you're subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of this show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Kahn. Thanks for joining us.